there is an alternative way to live. Whatever fashion you have fallen into in this life, and fallen into is the right way to put it, whatever manner or fashion or kind of life you've fallen into, after you've been in it for a number of years, you tend to take it as the solitary choice in life. More than that, the choice becomes the beloved habit, so that people don't even begin to question the possibility of something else. Something else, the alternative, something that is utterly unlike your present way of living. The alternative to unhappiness is not the human brand of happiness at all. The alternative to your search is not something that you can presently think about. It is something that is above all thought. The alternative to belief is to know. Now think about that long and hard. Think of how your life is presently occupied, dominated by beliefs. Do you not have thousands of beliefs and convictions and opinions which become your very life? They're not something apart from your life. They are the motivating, propelling forces of it. If you are depressed, don't you understand that you believe in that depression? That you accept it as the sole way of going through your life? Which means that you haven't even begun to consider the alternative to being dismayed or despondent. Oh, if you want a real rest in your life, let me urge you to begin to rest from your collection of habitual beliefs. Anyone can believe, which means that anyone and everyone can wreck the world with them. Let me tell you what a belief is. A belief is an idea that gives you a certain self-satisfaction in which you enjoy the pleasure of it, that you want to continue to believe it for the rest of your life, whether it is true or not. So simply believing something is the way of laziness, of the way of self-deception, of assuring that you will never ever have to face yourself as you really are. You can say, I believe that I'm religious, or I believe that I'm good, or I believe that I'm developing. And the belief cancels out and makes impossible all further investigation of your life. Which means that you yourself, by assenting to a life of belief instead of fact, that you yourself are responsible, and you alone are responsible for your own unhappiness and grief and your confusion and your chaos. Because anytime you want to drop your self-harming beliefs, there is no one who can stop you. And if you could see it, not even your own hardened nature can stop you, because it is possible for you to let the warmth of truth begin to melt down all these hardened opinions and convictions. Melt them down so that there's nothing there at all of you anymore, and therefore there's space for something that is authentic, that is the real alternative. A person with hundreds and thousands of beliefs is a very hard man. is a very hard woman, is a person who has to watch his step every minute during the day, has to watch his step that he doesn't accidentally say the wrong thing, that he doesn't accidentally offend someone who can do him some good. Can you think of a worse way to live than that you have to tiptoe around? You live that way now, don't you? Don't you know it? Don't you see it? Don't you see how frightened you are of offending someone? You think if you go around smiling a lot and believing a lot in other people, that in some way, in some mysterious, magical way, so you think, that they will be able to do something for you and make you feel better, make you feel secure. When are you going to learn? The only source of your authentic alternative, which is authentic happiness, is to depend utterly on remaking yourself, allowing the light of truth to remake you so that you can face the world without blinking at all. Haven't you noticed how different you behave toward a person from whom you want nothing than from someone from whom you want something? And haven't you noticed how you change towards someone that you once wanted something from but no longer want it? How your attitudes change and your words and your actions toward them change? Haven't you seen that? Believers are slaves. Now, you tell a believer just that he's enslaved by his own beliefs, and he will prove to you the fact of it. Is it not slavery to be anxious? Is it not slavery to be irritable? Suppose someone told another person that he was simply a bundle of beliefs having no substance, no truth, no goodness about them at all, and that other person got mad. Wouldn't he prove for himself the evidence? Wouldn't that be evidence itself that beliefs are shallow things that we frantically and foolishly protect? Why do you have to believe anything? Well, I've told you why. Because the last thing you want to do is replace your foolish beliefs with facts. So if we cut off all beliefs, all fancies, all follies, what will be the alternative? Well, you should know that. The alternative is to know. To believe is not to know. To believe is to make it impossible to know reality. You can believe that you know reality, but all you have is fantasy parading as reality. Beliefs are the wall that prevents you from seeing what's on the other side that's solid ground compared to the marsh that you're standing on now. And a person who says, well, I used to be unhappy and I used to wander around in life, but now I've found philosophy or found religion or found better circumstances, and now I believe I'm happier, has merely gone from the marsh to the swamp. And he'll go back to the marsh again, back and forth, because beliefs never change their level. They are always shallow, they are always marshy, always keeping us uncomfortable. Let me tell you a story. Here's a wartime, and a young lieutenant is stationed in a village, let's say in Europe somewhere. And he's stationed in a village in Europe during wartime. And he's a lieutenant and, of course, ambitious, and he wears his uniform very neatly and trim, is very proud of his being an officer. And one day the general comes over and appoints him the task of going around town and putting up announcements about the recent victories in the war. So the lieutenant goes to the printer and gets some announcements about the battles they've won here and there and how morale is high in the troops and in the home front too. So the lieutenant takes these announcements and wanders around town with them, putting them up in public places down the village square. And something pleasant happens to him. That is, it pleasant happens to him in his own eyes. And what happens is that here he is all sharp and shiny with his boots and his helmets and his medals. As he walks around and puts up the announcement, he notices that he's the center of attention. And he puts up the announcements of the victories of their army in the fields. And the girls come over and hand him flowers and smile at him. And the men shake his hand and thank him for protecting the country against the enemy. He likes that. Now let's pause a little bit and see what has happened so far. The young lieutenant in his uniform, which he keeps very neatly pressed and the medals polished, he goes out into the street putting up notices of an event in which many human beings were injured, of course. And he puts up the notice, and the girls smile at him, and the men compliment him, congratulate him. And he feels good. Now, look, try to parallel this with your life. Because if you see what is actually happening, you can begin to shed your beliefs and put something real in its place. He feels good. Every time he goes into town to put up the notices of the victories, he gets all this nice attention, which he enjoys immensely. Now listen. An event has happened. That is, he puts up the notices and he is complimented and smiled at by everyone and patted on the shoulder. He says that event is me. I believe in this event, therefore I can believe in me because the event creates a certain pleasure inside of me. Now, he wants that event to continue the next week, doesn't he? Which, in the story, it does. Next week, he gets another set of announcements. Our army's won over here. Goes around, people flatter him again, tell him how pleased they are to have him in town, and they admire his uniform, and the girls flirt with him, and he likes that. So this continues for quite a while, and all the time he is getting a new hardened set of beliefs in himself. Great pleasure over it. He believes in the events as they connect with him, and he wants them to go on and on and on. Well, have you ever heard of such a thing as change in life? Things change, do they not? Different events take over. So this is what happened in the case of the young lieutenant. The war started going against his country and against his village. And so he had to change the wording in the announcements, and he had to put on a different facial expression. And so when he went around town for the next few times, he had to put bad news in it, which he colored to make it look less serious, that is, less serious as it could. But he also noticed, to his dismay, that the girls didn't smile quite so much, and the men didn't pat him on the shoulder so much, and the other soldiers didn't salute him quite so much. Are you connecting this with what happens to you? That pleasant event you had, and you believed in the event, believing it was you, which it wasn't at all. So you know what he began doing? What human beings do? He began falsifying the reports. He began saying that our glorious armies are winning over on the Eastern Front and the Western Front, and we're going to win the war, and other lies. And this went on for a long, long time. And all this time, he, because he had some power of self-watching, he began to see how he had to struggle now to believe in both the events and in himself, because they were tied so closely together inside of him. And after a long, long time of suffering, he saw what all wise human beings must eventually see, which is that he had tied himself by belief to an event, to a condition, to a circumstance, and received his sense of self-worth from it. He believed in himself when things went right, when the war was going right. And he saw how he had to begin to disbelieve in himself when things went wrong. So he did the only sensible thing to do. He went home and took off his uniform and just stayed home and didn't walk around and get anything out of the situation anymore, even disappointment that the conditions had changed. He understood very clearly, as you are going to have to understand yourself, that you are tied by belief to so many things of which you are unconscious. And the pleasurable ones, you kind of like those, but the unpleasant ones you try to push out of your mind. Don't you see, you believe in the negative ones just as much as in the pleasant ones. What's your uniform? Where do you feel elated because you believe in yourself simply because an event has happened? A true man, a true woman knows what it means to be completely disassociated, unidentified with exterior events, which means they cannot touch him either what is called favorably or what is called harmfully. Are you willing to give up both? Are you willing to give up walking around town, liking the flattery and the salutes and the compliments? Can you give that up? If you can give that up, you won't have the pain. Then any event, no event, will have any effect on you at all, because you're above it, because you are free. You're free of impressions, wrong impressions. We said beliefs. You're free of all beliefs in exterior things at all. And you can listen. Do you want this, or do you want your beliefs? Which is it? If you want out, if you really want the alternative, it is yours for the dropping of your false beliefs in yourself. I tell you, let's see if you can understand this, if you can take it. In reality, there is no one to believe in. In reality, there's no one to believe in a so-called positive sense or in a so-called negative sense. Think of all the difficulties that you experience in your past life, the things you're afraid of even tonight as you're hearing this. Think of all the things that you're afraid of, and I will guarantee you that somewhere down there you have connected yourself by belief with an event, with a hope, with a wish to try to confirm yourself. And you can never succeed in doing that because there's no one there who needs to be confirmed as an individual. But this you have to see for yourself. We talked about alternatives, and now you have the framework, the foundation for one of them. I ask you again, why do you believe in anything at all? And I've given you the reason, and you think about it yourself. Instead of saying, I am going to have an attitude toward this or that, why don't you just drop the attitude and get the facts? And if you will drop the opinion, you will have the fact. And that fact will guide you in a way which you are now wanting your belief to do for you, but which it cannot. Now, it depends again on what you want. Do you really want guidance in life? I tell you, you can have it. Willing to give up your phony beliefs? That's what they are. Why don't you call them what they are? Why don't you have the courage to see how they have damaged you? And why don't you have the perception to see how fiercely you fight? When reality instructs you, just drop your beliefs and leave it alone and see what happens. What will happen will be the alternative. So dropping of beliefs is one thing. Another alternative, dropping agreement. Oh, you'd rather agree than be real, wouldn't you? You'd rather agree with a sick society, with this world. You'd rather assent because you think they have power. You think they have something that you need. You don't need a thing from the world. Well, one thing, and that's freedom from it. While being right in it, while conducting your business, while raising your children, running your home, right in the middle of this world, you can be free of its madness. So, dropping agreement to the world as it presently is, dropping agreement and simply refusing to agree. Let's take a woman as our example in the next illustration. Here's a woman who goes to a lecture with several friends, 7 or 8 friends. And they go to the lecture, and there's hundreds of people in the hall. And the speaker gets up, and he does something very unique. Everything he says is the truth. Every idea, every word is the truth. So they hear the lecture about the truth about society, about organizations, about everything, about individuals and groups, the truth about the madness of the world. And when they go out, on the way home, all the other people criticize the speaker, and they are angry, and they are tense. Of course they are. Don't you know people get tense and angry when they're told the truth about society and about themselves? Of course they do. So she got all this. She defended it a little bit, and they started attacking her. They went on and on and on about how the speaker had no business talking that way. Finally, someone turned to her and asked her, well, how come you're not joining us in of course, our right position in attacking the speaker? And do you know what she said? Listen to this and never forget what I'm going to say next. She said to these attacking people, she said, everything you have said proves the truth of what the speaker said. My dear friends, he said that people can be very vicious, and you are proving it. He said that people don't want realities and truth, and you are proving it. And she told them exactly the way she felt in calm manner, of course. What do you think of that? What do you think of that alternative for you sometime? And wasn't that a marvelous thing she said, right to the point? And isn't it true? If you know a little bit of truth and you observe the world out there, isn't the behavior of the world that you see on television and that you see in the city and you see in your home and you see in the office, isn't everything out there a confirmation of the knowing that truth is right? Well, who do you want to ally yourself with? On which side do you think resides true safety. You are not safe now. I know it, and you know it. You tiptoe around. You're afraid to offend people. You're very careful, aren't you? As a matter of fact, the proper word for your condition is suppression. Why don't you try sometime? Why don't you try sometime? Even timidly at the start would be enough. Why don't you try sometime standing up for what you know is right? Come on. You can sense the difference between truth and falsehood. Let that sensing carry you all the way so that it becomes very easy and very beautiful for you to stand up for truth, which is the same thing as standing up for your true and everlasting life.